Okay, well, today we are going to dive into a tool called assertiveness and active listening, and it is somewhat comparable to the idea of listening for heaven's sake or apples of gold material that some have used. The idea from this, the language comes from Prepare Enrich, and whether you end up using the Prepare Enrich tool or not, I do think there's some real value in teaching this skill. If you've ever been through the Prepare Enrich materials, and Tom, I know you've been through Symbis, and there may be others that have been familiar with other tools, but this is one of the metrics that gets demonstrated or released to the facilitator when you send somebody through the Prepare Enrich Marriage online assessment. And it's one of the reasons I like it is because of this particular set of data. The slide is showing assertiveness, self-confidence, avoidance, and partner dominance. And if I only got to see one bit of data out of all of Prepare Enrich to get a handle on how a couple kind of got along and who felt good about it and who felt like they were just kind of an afterthought, this would be the metric I would want out of Prepare Enrich. I think it's all good. I think this is the most valuable. And so what we're looking at on this slide is an unhealthy kind of relational dynamic, or a reasonably unhealthy relationship dynamic, where assertiveness and self-confidence are low and avoidance and partner dominance are high. So on a healthy one, I can just go to, like, this would be one that we went through a couple. This would be a very healthy metric, where the assertiveness is very high, the self-confidence is high, avoidance, partner dominance is low. Just a really quick overview of this, so you understand what you're looking at. Assertiveness is this: do I know how to say what's important to me? Do I have the skill and the courage to speak up in our relationship? And so if that's low, that obviously means you have a dynamic that's not very healthy. So self-confidence, same way. It's this idea that you feel important or valuable in the relationship. And so then the inverse, if you don't feel those things, and this is how they typically grade out, is if you don't feel confident, if you don't feel like you have a voice, then you will be more prone to avoid things. And then so conflict, your own personhood, your own being known would all start to shrink pretty significantly if you don't have that confidence. And then the partner dominance, this is important. This is not like domestic violence. This is just a sense of kind of being drug along in the relationship. I don't have a high value in the relationship, so my voice, my person, my opinions probably don't matter all that much. And so why this is cool is, and we've worked with some couples over years growing this assertiveness skill, and so how the assertiveness and active listening work in this. If we can just help couples, help individuals as a couple in the relationship, if we can help them feel confident to communicate what's important to them in a safe and healthy way, in a respectful way, then all the other metrics start to come into balance. Occasionally, as you think about assessment tools and you're debating Prepare Enrich, occasionally you can just find somebody that's really self-confident and doesn't care what people think, and they show up as a healthy metric here. But most of the time, it's a pretty good indicator. Is there healthy stuff going on here? These people know how to communicate. And so if you think about conflict, settling conflict, and communication, this is a primary communication tool in helping couples. Is how can you teach them how to communicate what's important to them in a way that keeps them out of their current loops and patterns and defensiveness. Okay, so that's the big idea and how it relates to the Prepare Enrich and why that's important. That they do complement each other. And as we get into the exercise, we'll a few more comments on the Prepare Enrich. So I'm going to show you real briefly here. This isn't how we would teach it in class, but if we were sitting in a small group, we would just have people pull this out. And this is one of the pages out of the workbook, and it's really two parts. It's two pages that face each other in there. One is the kind of learning the script, and the second page, the opposing page, is kind of developing your wish list. So one is a process of thinking, okay, how should I say it? And then the second one is more of a what should I say? And then this little grayed out box on the second page is just kind of a reminder of what you're going to be teaching them to help them be successful. So you want to pay attention to that box. If you're in the room with them as they're doing it, or you're going to coach somebody through it and help them be successful, those are some helpful teaching points to hang on to. And some of the skilled teaching points that we talked about last week, we may not reiterate every time on this. I may put just a short 2 or 3 minute video of, hey, always remind people of these 5 things as they're going to try to have a time to connect. But again, the idea of looking each other, having each other's gaze, and being able to be in a posture that's receiving, asking, is this a good time to share my heart with you? All those things are going to help people be successful. So you always that's what we do, and we would encourage you to help people capture the moment and not just kind of abruptly go into sharing a request without kind of setting their mate up for an opportunity to really hear and listen and be in a posture of wanting to connect and knowing that's actually what's going on. So as you step into this, that's what you're going to find in it, that'll be downloadable off the website, those exercises, as well as if you're teaching a larger group and you want to use the slides to kind of coach a group through it, then you can do that as well. All right. So when we think about assertiveness and active listening, assertiveness is the skill of expressing your needs and what is important to you in a safe and respectful way. So a couple things that we've done different from Prepare and Enrich. This is a tool that came primarily from them. I would say it was a little heavier on the psychological and a little less on the Christian care and carefulness. A little less of an appeal, a little more of a demand. If you get, and you can find this tool out there directly from Prepare and Enrich. We've tried to make it a little more sanctified, a little more grace-filled, a little more of a request, and that departs a little bit from maybe the way assertiveness or your rights or your personhood might be taught in general secular psychology. And so you'll see that difference hopefully as we talk about how we teach this tool. So assertiveness. So there's two people that are doing this. One is going to have the job to be assertive. The other is going to have the job to be an active listener and to really help people see what this is different, how this can be different than their normal patterns. So assertiveness, and this is also where we understand that I have the right to tell you and request care for my needs. I do not have the right to demand that you care for me and meet my needs. This is where it separates from that idea of being demanding. And if someone says, well, this is my need, you have to meet it. Well, no, that's not actually the way it works. But you have a right as a human, and in this covenant that we have in friendship or marriage or co-leading or whatever, team, whatever it is, we've agreed to care for each other. So yes, bring your requests. Let's talk about them. So this is an important definition. Assertiveness is the skill of expressing your needs and what is important to you in a safe and respectful way. It is not demanding. It is a request and nothing more. It is an exercise in being known. Okay? Active listening, and this is where it will separate in the middle of it. This is the strong call from other really good tools that exist out there. Is we're going to call people to actually say, "Do I care?" You're telling me something, and I'm going to choose to cultivate my care muscle and say, "I want you to be cared for." And that's the connecting piece that flows out of this. So it's choosing to care. That's the first job of the active listener about that person's needs, and then restating their request in order to know them, to let them know you heard them, to let them know you understood. And so in that regard, it's not all that different than any other reflective listening tool. The piece that separates this for the assertiveness is it is a request, and it's using relational need language. For the active listener, it's making that choice to hit the pause button and go, I want that need to be met. I want you to feel cared for. Okay? And by doing that, we can stay out of that defensiveness. So it's active listening. So oftentimes our loops, our relational loops, the dynamics can be, I'm going to try to make a request. I'm met with defensiveness. I'm either going to amp up and restate it if I'm confident or assertive, or I'm going to shut down and back away and just go off and stop trying to connect. So that's the pattern that exists in some of those relational dynamics metrics that we were looking at in those two slides. So that's really important. This is not demanding, and if we active listen well, we can shepherd our hearts away from being defensive. I want my mate, my co-elder, whoever it is we're talking about, to experience care, and that's part of my job, so I'm going to listen carefully. All right? So assertiveness, again, is an exercise. When you think about know, be known, care, act, where does this fit in? This is an exercise in being known and giving someone, giving your mate, really clear understanding of how they can act and care. You're giving them really clear direction to say, this would really meet my need for acceptance or security or comfort. This would make me feel loved and delighted in. This would meet my need for affection. And then they can state this specific thing. And fundamentally, this is an act of vulnerability. I'm going to say, I have a need. I'm going to expose it to you, and I'm going to give you a chance and make a request that you would care for me. It's not a demand. Now, can be really, really hurtful if someone just continually doesn't choose to express care, but that is fundamentally an act of vulnerability. Again, not that demanding idea. In active listening, it is primarily an exercise in knowing someone. Oh, that's how you receive and experience care in having the need for. So it's an exercise in knowing someone, and then expressing that you do care that need is met. And this is really, really important that you help people understand. This is not a to-do list. In fact, it's not even a promise that you're going to do what they said. Okay? It's really important to help people understand, to listen well and to give somebody voice. You are not promising that this is the way it's going to go, that I'm going to fulfill your request. But you are saying, I do care, and I want to understand how I can care for you more effectively. So you're not just giving me a to-do list that I can, oh, great, I have more stuff to do. It is, I get in this posture of saying, I'm going to position myself as someone who wants to give care. Just quick anecdote that I share again, in all of these things, the more you can bring your life, your anecdotes to this is how it is expressed, this is how you've done it with your wives or husbands, or assuming there's ladies watching at some point here in your marriages, adding your anecdotes. And this is just one we did with our youngest daughter, and all of our growing up years, all of our children's growing up years, I would respond to, Dad, we're bored. Well, let's go clean the garage. If you're bored, let's find some work to do. And they would typically scramble and be less bored. At least if they were bored, they didn't do it where I could hear them saying they were bored, because that's just one of my methods of trying to help them kind of find something productive to do. So I think they had mostly a hate relationship with cleaning my garage. And so several years ago now, our youngest daughter was over. She was probably in her mid-late 20s somewhere. And I said and I just was helping her understand this idea of assertiveness. And I mentioned to her, I said, honey, you want to help me clean my garage? And I was legitimately going to clean my garage that day. And she goes, no, not really. Mom and I were going to go to the thrift store or something. And I said, okay, that's great. Well, you know what, honey, it would really help meet my need for support and just a sense of appreciation from you if you were to find some time to help me clean my garage. That would really say something very meaningful to me. And she goes, oh, well, I'd love to do that. And so once it becomes a relational call, it changes the request. Now, that doesn't mean she has to, but what we're trying to say is this is about an invitation to relate to me and care for me, not just do tasks. And that's where it becomes really, really important that we help people understand that. So I'm going to just share a couple examples. This top one you could use with roommates or in any relationship where the people would be cohabitating. The second one's a little more obviously someone that's sharing responsibility for finances. But so the goal of the assertiveness statements, it would help make me feel respected and supported. So using either relational need language or emotional language, if we kept the bathroom sink area free of stuff and wipe down the surfaces when we're done with it. And so it becomes an opportunity to say, this is important to me. This makes me feel like my space matters to you. that there's a level of respect here that you're demonstrating to me when we these common areas, we don't just neglect them. And it is a relational care thing. And then the second one, help meet my need for security, if we could talk over larger financial decisions together before, what's implied there is before we would go and make a large decision. And so sometimes these sound really small and petty, and you go, well, why would you do that? Well, just maybe another anecdote from our relationship. And when we lived in an apartment upstairs, and there was kind of a window above the bathroom door, like a transom window, so a little light came in the bathroom. And I would be in the shower, and the fan and the light were on, and Cindy would come in and take care of something, do something, her hair or something. And as she would leave, she would flip the light off. And after a while, almost every time, and she never asked, you want the light on or off? She preferred it dark, so maybe that's what she was thinking. That doesn't really matter. How it was landing in me relationally was, I felt like she was saying, and this was totally just not what was going on, but what it was saying in my soul was, wow, saving 2 cents on the electric bill is more significant than asking me, I'm not here. I'm trouble. And so my self-talk was really in this really unhealthy place. But I was making assumptions about, honey, you are just really not paying attention to what my interests might be here. And I felt very disrespected, very, very devalued in it. So I shared that as an assertiveness statement. And this is many times how this goes. She didn't even know she was doing it. But in my head, it was this very, it was this detraction from relationship and care. And now she goes, oh no, I want to be mindful of that. I don't want to treat you like you're not important to me. And so it was this small thing, but I had to be aware. I had to be willing to be aware of the trigger, and go, Lord, what is that? Why does that feel so heavy? Because the reality is, I don't care. I don't care if the light's on or off. I can see. It was something relationally that was happening that I needed to address, so that she would know and be able to express it. And she said, well, I really would prefer it to be off, but I'd rather have you cared for. And we came to a decision together to turn the light off. I'd be okay with that. It was just, were we going to be in relationship in it, or was it going to be just her exerting her will? And I'm sure I do that to her all the time as well. So the goal is paying attention relationally. Remember, those emotions are going to tell us what's going on in our soul. They're going to start to reveal something we believe. And in that moment, as the light went off and she turned and went about her day, what it spoke in my soul, the belief I was, wow, she doesn't think I'm very significant or worthy of talking to or asking about, my preference in that. So that's why it becomes important that we don't just go, I won't worry about it. If I could really just say it doesn't matter, well, then you don't have to make an assertive statement. But if it's beginning to feed beliefs, or we're missing opportunities to be caring for each other or connected to one another, then we have to deal with it. So that's a big part, is don't see them as petty, see them as opportunities to be known. Because oftentimes those little choices we make to express care are the things that God uses to build our sense of connection. So as you're teaching this skill, the other thing to remember, well, there's several things to remember. One is, we encourage couples to have a very hard stop at the conclusion of it. Okay? When the listener gets done saying, did I hear you correct? The speaker, the assertiveness person, says, yes, you did. Stop, pause, connect. Don't solve any problems. The instinct is going to be that, okay, let's resolve that. So it would help meet my need for security if we could, and affection, if we could take a walk every 3 or 4 times a week after dinner before we started our evening activities. Our instinct is going to go, let's develop a plan for that. Well, if someone really does struggle with being assertive, it's really important for them to just kind of simmer in the idea of being heard. Okay, to not move to something else, to not debate it right away, but to just let them feel heard. Now, I don't think, from what I know of anybody that's on that I'm looking at right now, I don't think any of you would struggle being assertive, from what I know of you. But you would be surprised how often this really becomes a hindrance to care and connection, is they just don't feel like they can share what's important to them. And they don't know how to do it in a safe and respectful way without being, or they think they should just be a martyr and not ask for care, which then you're not being known. You're telling you're telling your mate, you're just going to have to guess. In fact, that's one of the great lies of our culture. If you love me, you would just know. If you love me, you would just know. I shouldn't have to tell you. Well, that's just, I think it's abusive. Well, how would I know? Tell me. I want to do it well. I want to be a student of you. Now, it doesn't mean I never figure out anything or that I'm not looking for opportunities. But boy, if you could tell me, you give me the heads up, wow, this is really meaningful to me. This really expresses care in this way. I want that information because I want to care. So we're really blessing and helping each other. So if you look at those assertiveness statements, the listener's job is really simple. Is to first say, do I care? Do I care? So you're looking at this, the example there. Do I feel that my wife would feel respected and supported? Do I care about that? Is that important to me? Okay. And then I would repeat that. If we wouldn't feel respected and supported, if we kept the bathroom sink area free of stuff and wiped down the surfaces when we're done. Did I hear you correctly? Yes, you did. Great. Thank you. Kiss, quiet, move away. For at least for a little break. A few minutes, just to let it simmer. A couple things to keep in mind as you're coaching people. Encourage people not to tell a lot of story. Because if people are telling a lot of story when they're making an assertive statement, then the listener cannot attach to the care muscle. They're just struggling intellectually to try to remember everything you're saying and try to figure out what are the important things. So to do the hard work of creating a succinct statement for the assertiveness, the person being assertive. To write it out if you have to, and maybe that's the best way. Practice it. Know what you're going to say. The second thing is, don't be careful as the listener to not say, so what you're saying is, so there's a way to say, I'm hearing you, I'm open to that, that stays out of that defensiveness. Encourage him to pause. Now, in all of this, please keep in mind, there is no promise in any of this exercise that any of this is going to happen. It is simply an exercise in hearing or speaking that which is important to us in a safe and respectful way, and then hearing that and letting them know you know and hear and care. Encourage the speaker to be specific enough to be helpful. Occasionally someone will say, I would feel more cared for if you cared for me more. That's not particularly helpful. So trying to use the relational need language. In fact, we encourage, usually when we're doing events, each of the members of the couples have their own sheet. We say use the relational need on one side and use the script on the other, so you can kind of see if something else comes up as you're sharing or as you're thinking, you have access to those relational needs. So that's the big idea here. And so what do you do if you can't do it? So what if they make a request that is just untenable? It's not going to work. Well, you can still hear them. After you hit the hard pause, you can come back and say something like, honey, I really, really want you to feel respected and supported. But I am just not sure if I can hit that target. Could we talk about other ways that I could make sure that you feel respected and supported? If it just seems untenable. The joke one we always use is that, Cindy brought a request to me that I would feel, it would help meet my need for affection and support if we could go to Maui for a couple weeks every month. And I go, okay, that's not possible. That's not going to happen. But I can still hear her request and hear what would meet it, and then we can come back and circle back and talk through it. By the way, this tool, as we move forward, next time we get together, we'll be talking about confession and forgiveness. But this is also the way, if you feel hurt, this is also the tool you would say, can we talk about this? It would help meet my need for security and comfort if we could talk about that hard conversation we had this morning. So it's a way to bring it up in a way that's an appeal towards relationship and connection, and not just like hey, you need to get it right. It's drawing people into that caring connection relationship.